Have you ever witnessed perfection crumble at the hands of madness? In the vast silence of deep space, where tactics are sacred and predictability is law, a single reckless idea dared to challenge centuries of order. What followed rewrote the rules of war forever. The impossible turn. Commander Riven Solari stood at the command bridge of the starborn Eclipse, his forearms precisely positioned on the tactical controls as he watched the pirate vessels emerge from the plasma clouds. Their sensor readings had warned of this ambush 3 minutes ago, more than enough time to arrange his fleet into the prescribed helix formation, Level 3. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the precise pitch that denoted authority in Valerian culture. Commander Threx responded with equal precision. All 27 vessels aligned according to Fleet Protocol 5.8.3, Captain. Shield harmonics synchronized at 98.6% efficiency. A smile touched Riven Solari's upper lip plates. Perfect. The Valerian Defense Fleet had spent 3 centuries perfecting their combat formations. Every possible scenario had been calculated, every response optimized. These pirates were about to learn why the Valerian military was considered the most sophisticated fighting force in the Outer Rim. "Multiple energy signatures detected, Captain." The sensor officer's announcement carried a note of confusion. "The readings, they do not match known pirate weapon configurations." Riven Solari's secondary hearts maintained their steady rhythm. Hardly surprising, pirates cobble together whatever technology they can steal, maintain formation, prepare countermeasures according to... Sir Threx interrupted, a serious breach of protocol that made Riven Solari's antennae twitch. "The human pilot is requesting permission to speak." The captain's lower arms tightened on his control panel. "Ah, yes, the human, Lieutenant Arya Blake. The result of that ridiculous exchange program with the Terran Command Corps. 3 months she had been aboard, and she had questioned every single protocol, suggested modifications to every procedure. Humans, always so chaotic, so unpredictable. This is hardly the time for another one of her innovative suggestions," Riven Solari said, watching as the first wave of pirate ships began their attack run. "Our formation is perfect. Our response will be..." The ship rocked as green energy beams sliced through their shields like they weren't even there. Alarms blared across the bridge. The perfect formation began to splinter as more ships took direct hits. "Impossible!" Threx shouted, all pretense of protocol forgotten. "They are using modified tachyon disruptors. Our shields were not calibrated for..." "Captain," the communication officer's voice cracked with urgency. "Lieutenant Stone says she recognizes these weapon signatures, says she encountered something similar in the Proxima incident last year. She is requesting emergency permission to..." "Enough." Riven Solari slammed one of his hands down on the comm panel. "Put her through." The human's voice filled the bridge, carrying that insufferable tone of casual confidence that seemed to be a species trait. "Captain, those are rigged tachyon disruptors, but they have a critical weakness in their targeting systems. If you'll just let me demonstrate a little maneuver we cooked up back at Terran Command Corps." Another blast rocked the ship. 3 Valerian vessels were already showing critical damage. The perfect formation was falling apart, and for the first time in his 30-year career, Commander Riven Solari felt real fear creeping into his secondary nervous system. "Lieutenant Stone," he said, his voice tight. "What exactly are you proposing?" The human's response was immediate, almost eager. "Something absolutely crazy, sir. Something no Valerian pilot would ever think of doing. Something that might just save this entire fleet, if you're willing to throw the rulebook out the airlock." Riven Solari looked at his tactical display, watched as more red warning indicators bloomed across the screen. The pirates were herding them toward the plasma clouds, using their own perfect formation against them. Everything was falling apart, and the human wanted to try something crazy. How utterly, terrifyingly human. The deck of the starborn Eclipse shuddered as another volley of modified tachyon blasts tore through their defenses. Commander Riven Solari watched in mounting horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. The pirates were not just attacking randomly. They were executing a precisely calculated plan of their own. "Sir, the Starweaver and the Dawn Sentinel are reporting critical hull breaches." Threx's voice had lost all pretense of military discipline. "The Morning Light has lost engine power completely." So through the main viewport, Riven Solari could see the pirate vessels moving with disturbing coordination. They were not the rabble he had expected. Their fleet moved like a shoal of predatory fish, each imperfectly positioned to drive the Valarian vessels exactly where they wanted them. "They are herding us toward the plasma clouds," the navigation officer announced, her antenna drooping in distress. "At current trajectory, we will be forced to enter the storm in approximately 6 minutes." "Impossible," Riven Solari muttered. "They cannot possibly know our emergency protocols. Unless..." His 4 hands clenched simultaneously as realization struck. "Unless they have accessed our tactical databases, cross-referenced the pirate commander's attack patterns with known Valarian strategies." The tactical officer's response was immediate and devastating. "Match found, Captain. They are using our own counter-formation Theta against us. Every defensive maneuver we attempt is being predicted and countered before we can execute it." A harsh laugh cut through the bridge's atmosphere of despair. Lieutenant Arya Blake's voice, transmitted from her fighter cockpit, carried an almost inappropriate tone of amusement. "Of course they are. Your tactics are perfect, Captain, which makes them perfectly predictable. Mind if I share my crazy idea now before we all get turned into plasma cloud confetti?" Riven Solari's secondary hearts were beating erratically now. 5 ships lost. The pride of the Valarian fleet being systematically dismantled by pirates using their own tactics against them. He could almost hear his ancestors screaming in shame. "Speak quickly, Lieutenant Stone," he managed through clenched mandibles. "Those modified tachyon disruptors, they pack a hell of a punch, but they have a critical weakness. The targeting systems can't handle rapid vector changes at close range. Back in the Proxima incident, we figured out that if you get close enough and pull off something really unexpected, you can force them into a cascade failure." Commander Threx's skepticism dripped from every word. "And what exactly do you mean by unexpected, human?" "Well," Kira's voice took on that particular tone that Riven Solari had learned meant trouble was coming. "What if we took your perfect formation and did something completely imperfect with it? Something so crazy that no tactical computer could possibly predict it." "Specifics," Lieutenant Riven Solari demanded as another blast rocked the ship. "We have 4 minutes until we are forced into the plasma clouds. I need control of the fleet's navigation systems, all of them. And I need every ship to follow my lead exactly, no matter how insane it looks. We're going to turn your helix formation into something I like to call the Crazy Ivan Special." "The what?" Threx practically screeched. "Named after an old Earth submarine maneuver. Captain, I know this goes against every protocol in your database, but right now those protocols are getting us killed. Your perfect formation is based on mathematical precision. What we need right now is some good old-fashioned human chaos." Through the viewport, Riven Solari watched as 3 more of his ships took critical hits. The pirates were tightening their net, their formations flawless, their timing impeccable. Using stolen Valerian tactics, they had turned perfection against itself. Perhaps, he thought with a shudder that ran through all his limbs, it was time for imperfection. "Lieutenant Stone," he said, his voice carrying a resignation that made his crew stare in shock. "You have control of the fleet. May the ancestors forgive me." "Trust me," Captain Kira replied with that maddening human confidence. "When this is over, your ancestors will be buying me drinks. All ships on my mark, prepare to execute the craziest turn in Valerian naval history, and whatever you do, do not think about the physics of what we are about to attempt. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." And as Riven Solari relinquished control of his beloved fleet to a human pilot with a reputation for insanity, he found himself wondering if perhaps this was how the universe ended, not with mathematical precision, but with human chaos. "All ships showing ready," Lieutenant Zorlak reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Though I feel compelled to note that this is a violation of approximately 37 separate fleet protocols." "Only 37? Kira's laugh echoed through the bridge again. "Then I must be losing my touch. All ships prepare to execute on my mark. And Captain, you might want to hold on to something. This is going to get weird." Lieutenant Aria Blake's fighter craft swooped to the front of the battered Valarian fleet, her voice crackling through the command channel with an enthusiasm that made Commander Riven Solari's antenna twitch nervously. "Here is how this works. When I give the signal, every ship needs to execute a full reverse thrust while simultaneously engaging their lateral drives at maximum power. Then, we're going to use the plasma storm's electromagnetic field as a slingshot." "That is physically impossible," the Starborn Eclipse's chief engineer shouted over the comm. "The gravitational forces alone would tear our ships apart." "Exactly." Kira's response was far too cheerful for someone proposing suicide. "That is precisely why it will work. The pirates are using predictive algorithms based on Valerian tactical databases. Those databases are built on what is possible. We are about to do the impossible." Through the viewport, Riven Solari watched as the pirate fleet continued their perfect execution of Valerian battle tactics. Their ships moved in harmony, a deadly dance of precision and power. 3 minutes until the plasma clouds would engulf them all. "The maneuver will create a localized gravity wave," Kira continued, her fighter darting back and forth as she took readings. "When their targeting systems try to adjust, they will overcorrect. But here is the best part. Their stolen Valerian protocols will force them to attempt to counter a maneuver that cannot exist. Their computers will literally have a nervous breakdown trying to solve an unsolvable problem." "And what prevents our computers from having the same breakdown?" Threx demanded, his scales shifting to a worried pale blue. "Because I am about to do something that would get me court-martialed in any civilized fleet. I am going to temporarily disable all the tactical computers. We are going to fly this one purely on instinct and manual control." A collective gasp echoed through the bridge. Flying without tactical computers. It was unheard of. It was insane. It was human. 2 minutes to plasma cloud interface, the navigation officer announced, her voice quavering. Riven Solari watched as more warning lights flashed across his command console. The pirates were tightening their formation, preparing for the kill. His perfect fleet, reduced to prey. "On my mark." Kira's voice had lost its playful edge, taking on a tone of intense concentration. "Disable tactical computers now." Across the fleet, screens went dark. The comfortable hum of predictive algorithms fell silent. Riven Solari felt naked, exposed, like a newly molted larva. Lateral drives to maximum power now. The ship groaned in protest as forces it was never designed to handle began to build. Warning klaxons blared across every deck. "Hull stress exceeding safety parameters," the engineering officer shouted. "We cannot maintain this. Reverse thrust on my mark." Kira's fighters swooped through the formation, a dance of controlled chaos. 3, 2, 1, mark. Riven Solari had lived through space battles, meteor storms, and even a small war. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. As 20 damaged Valarian warships executed a maneuver that should have been impossible, reality itself seemed to protest. The void lit up with crackling energy as the plasma storm reached out with tendrils of pure power. Ships spun and twisted, metal screamed, and for one terrible moment, Riven Solari was certain they were all about to die. Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. Structural integrity failing. Power fluctuations across all systems. The pirate fleet's perfect formation began to waver as their tactical computers attempted to predict and counter a maneuver that defied prediction. Ships collided as automated systems gave conflicting commands. But something was wrong. The Valarian fleet was spinning out of control. Ships careening toward each other as the plasma storm's electromagnetic field tore at them like a hungry beast. "Lieutenant Stone," Riven Solari shouted over the chaos. "This is not working. We are going to—" "Wait for it." Kira's voice was steel and silk. "Just wait for it." The bridge of the starborn Eclipse tilted at an impossible angle. Warning systems screamed. Officers clung to their stations as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. "We are breaking apart," Threx screamed, his scales now completely white with terror. Through the madness, through the chaos, through the death of physics itself, Arya Blake's voice rang out with absolute certainty. "Now comes the fun part." As the Valarian fleet spun in what appeared to be an uncontrolled death spiral, Lieutenant Arya Blake's voice cut through the chaos with laser precision. "All ships, power surge to forward shields in 3, 2, 1. Now." Energy cascaded across the fleet in waves of brilliant blue light. The plasma storm's electromagnetic tendrils crackled against their shields, creating a spectacular light show that momentarily blinded every sensor in range. "Impossible," the pirate leader, Ray's Core, muttered as he watched his tactical displays dissolve into nonsense. "Their formation, it cannot." But it was. The Valarian fleet, spinning like a massive cosmic top, was somehow using the plasma storm's own energy to create a gravity lens. Physics screamed in protest as 20 warships moved in ways that violated every known law of space combat. On the bridge of the starborn Eclipse, Commander Riven Solari watched in awe as warning lights began to shift from red to green. Somehow, impossibly, the fleet was stabilizing. "The pirates' targeting systems are failing," Threx announced, his scales shifting to a shocked purple. "Their computers are attempting to calculate our trajectory, and by the ancestors, they are literally burning out their processors." Kira's fighter danced through the midst of the chaos, her voice carrying an almost musical quality. "You see, Captain? That is the beauty of it. Their tactical computers are trying to solve an equation that has no solution. They are looking for pattern and perfection in pure chaos." Through the viewport, Riven Solari watched as the pirate fleet began to fall apart. Ships veered wildly as their automated systems crashed, trying desperately to counter a maneuver that their stolen Valarian protocols insisted could not exist. "All ships," Kira called out. Prepare for Phase 2. We are going to ride this gravity wake right down their throats. On my mark, full power to forward weapons. Target their command ships. Their formation is breaking now. The Valerian fleet, riding the electromagnetic waves like surfers on an impossible ocean, suddenly snapped into a new configuration. No longer spinning wildly, they now moved with deadly purpose, their previous chaos resolving into a strike formation that no tactical computer could have predicted. By all that lives, Vorn's voice crackled across the open channels, real fear evident in his tone. What kind of demons are you? Not demons, Kira replied cheerfully. Just one crazy human and a bunch of very brave Valarians who finally learned to think outside the box. 20 Valerian warships, their weapons supercharged by the plasma storm's energy, opened fire simultaneously. The pirate fleet, their tactical computers still trying to process the impossible, never stood a chance. Direct hits across their entire formation, the weapons officer shouted, his voice filled with disbelief and joy. Their shields are completely down. Their targeting systems are offline. 5 pirate vessels attempting to retreat. 3 more have lost power completely. Through it all, Kira's fighter continued to dance, leading the fleet in a ballet of controlled destruction that would have made any human pilot proud. "Captain," she called out, "would you like to do the honors? Their command ship is dead in space." Riven Solari stood tall, all 4 arms spread in a gesture of command that felt different now. Less rigid, more alive. "Lieutenant Stone, I believe you have earned that right. Please proceed." "Attention, pirate vessels," Kira broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Lieutenant Aria Blake of the Valerian Defense Fleet. Your tactical computers have failed. Your formation is broken. Your command ship is at our mercy. Do you wish to continue this dance, or shall we call it a day?" The response was immediate. Across the battlefield, pirate ships began powering down their weapons. On the main screen, Vorn appeared, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. "We surrender," he said simply. "Though I must know, what was the maneuver? Our tactical databases have nothing even remotely similar. That is because it has never existed before today," Riven Solari replied, surprising himself with the pride in his voice. It was pure, human chaos combined with Valerian precision, a new way of thinking about space combat that no computer could predict, because it had never been imagined. As the remaining pirate vessels signaled their surrender one by one, the bridge crew of the starborn Eclipse began to relax. Damage reports were coming in, but miraculously no ships had been lost in the final maneuver. "Lieutenant Stone," Riven Solari called out, watching as her fighter did one final victory roll before returning to formation. "I believe we will need to update the tactical databases, though I confess I have no idea how to describe what just happened." Kira's laugh filled the bridge once again, but this time no one flinched at its informality. "Simple, Captain. We just call it the impossible turn. Sometimes the best way to win is to do something so crazy that even your own computers think it cannot be done." As the fleet began rescue and recovery operations, Riven Solari found himself looking at the stars differently. For centuries, the Valarians had sought perfection in their military tactics. Today, they had found victory in imperfection, triumph in chaos, and strength in adaptation. "Lieutenant," he said softly, "I believe you have earned those drinks my ancestors owe you." "Thank you, Captain," Kira replied. "Though I should warn you, humans tend to get even crazier ideas when they're celebrating." For the first time in his career, Commander Riven Solari found himself looking forward to a little chaos. 3 days after what was already being called the impossible turn, the Grand Hall of the Velaryon Defense Fleet headquarters buzzed with conversation. Hundreds of officers gathered, their scales shifting through various colors of excitement as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Commander Riven Solari stood at the podium, his formal uniform adorned with precisely placed medals, trying to maintain his traditional composure. It was not easy, especially with Lieutenant Arya Blake standing nearby, barely containing her grin. "Members of the Defense Fleet," he began, his voice carrying across the hall, "we gather today to recognize an achievement that has fundamentally changed our understanding of space combat. Though perhaps more importantly, it has changed our understanding of ourselves." In the audience, Commander Threx nodded, his scales now a thoughtful shade of blue. The past 3 days had seen him reviewing the battle footage obsessively, trying to understand exactly how their impossible victory had been achieved. For 3 centuries, Riven Solari continued, the Velaryon Defense Fleet has pursued perfection. We have built our strategies on precision, our tactics on predictability, our strength on a wavering order. And then he paused, mandibles twitching in what those who knew him recognized as amusement. "We let a human join our fleet." Laughter rippled through the crowd, a sound rarely heard in these halls. Even the fleet admiral, known for his stoic demeanor, was displaying bands of mirth yellow across his scales. "Lieutenant Arya Blake, please step forward." Kira approached the podium, managing to make even the formal Velaryon uniform look somehow casual. A few gasps rose from the crowd as they noticed she had pinned her medals at slightly odd angles, breaking protocol in a way that was somehow both wrong and perfect. When the exchange program with Earth's Space Force was first proposed, Riven Solari said, "Many of us questioned the wisdom of integrating human pilots into our fleet. Their methods seemed chaotic, their thinking disordered, their approach to problems frankly bizarre." He turned to face Kira directly. "Lieutenant Stone, in the past 3 months, you have violated 37 separate fleet protocols, suggested modifications to 12 sacred battle formations, and introduced the phrase, 'doing a barrel roll,' into our tactical vocabulary." "Only 37 protocols," Sir Kira replied, eyes twinkling. "I really must try harder." More laughter, easier this time. The assembled officers were beginning to understand something their captain had already learned, that sometimes humor itself was a kind of wisdom. And then, Riven Solari continued, "When faced with certain defeat, when our perfect tactics were turned against us, when logic and order had failed, you introduced us to chaos. Beautiful, brilliant, impossible chaos." The massive viewing screen behind them lit up with footage of the impossible turn. The assembled officers watched in amazement as their fleet performed maneuvers that still defied explanation, dancing with the plasma storm in ways that no tactical computer would ever approve. "The Velaryon Defense Fleet hereby presents you with our highest honor, the Star of Innovation." Riven Solari lifted the medal, its crystalline surface catching the light. "Though I suspect we will need to rename it the Star of Impossible Ideas." As he pinned the medal to her uniform, deliberately not commenting on the fact that she had somehow made the others form a smiley face pattern, Kira spoke softly. "You know, Captain, the really impossible thing was not the maneuver itself. It was getting an entire fleet of Velaryons to stop thinking like computers and start thinking like living beings." Riven Solari stepped back to the podium. "Which brings me to our second announcement. The Defense Fleet Command has unanimously voted to expand the Human Integration Program. Furthermore, we will be establishing a new training division focusing on what we are calling Adaptive Tactical Response. He paused, watching the ripple of surprised color changes move through the crowd. Or as Lieutenant Stone suggests we call it, the How to Think Like a Crazy Human Academy. This time the laughter was accompanied by appreciative trills, the Valarian equivalent of applause. In the front row, the Fleet Admiral's scales had shifted to a deep gold of approval. Lieutenant Stone will be leading this initiative, Riven Solari announced, though she has agreed to limit the number of barrel rolls in the training simulations. No promises about loop-de-loops, though, Kira added, causing several older officers to flicker anxiously. As the ceremony concluded and the reception began, Riven Solari found himself standing with Kira and Zarlak, watching as Valarian officers mingled more casually than he had ever seen. I still cannot quite believe it worked, Zarlak admitted, sipping his ceremonial nectar. Even after reviewing the footage 100 times, my logical mind insists it should have been impossible. That is exactly why it worked, Kira replied. The best solutions sometimes lie in the space between possible and impossible. You just have to be willing to look there. Riven Solari found himself nodding. Perhaps that is what we truly learned. Not just a new tactical maneuver, but a new way of seeing the universe, a way that combines Valarian precision with human improvisation. Just wait until I teach you all about jazz music, Kira said with a wink. Now that is really going to bake your processors. As his officers celebrated, and his friend tried to explain the concept of musical improvisation to an increasingly confused Zarlak, Commander Riven Solari looked out at the stars visible through the hall's massive windows. They seemed different now, less like points on a tactical display and more like opportunities for discovery. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest victory was not in achieving perfection, but in learning to embrace imperfection. And sometimes it took a crazy human pilot to teach an entire civilization how to dance with chaos.